Welcome to Black Onyx Alternative Investments, where we bring you face-to-face with some of South Africa's most talented boutique asset managers and industry stakeholders. Today I'd like to introduce you to Bruce Mommsen, who runs the Matrix NCIS Multi-Strategy Retail Hedge Fund, which was established in 2006. Bruce, thank you for joining us and the opportunity to interview you. Could you please tell us a bit about your career and exactly how you got into alternative investments?
I started out with the board of executives, BOE Asset Management, in the late 90s. Traditional long-only investment management business. And I started out as an analyst and later portfolio manager, covering banks, life companies, and financial services. And at the same time, backed up a colleague of mine on some alternative strategies that we were running at BOE. So BOE had a bank, and on the bank balance sheet had a hedge fund, and also ran a third-party hedge fund, which was domiciled offshore, investing back into South Africa. And corporate SA was going through its unbundling phase, so there was a lot of arbitrage opportunities to be had. So that was my start in running hedge strategies within a larger house. And then when Brait went into the alternative strategies space by launching a fund of hedge funds in sort of early 2000s, they ended up approaching a lot of managers in an attempt to seed managers and secure capacity for their fund of hedge funds business, which they saw as a shortage of capacity as a threat. And so the two of us left BOE to start a long-short equity fund, which was seeded by Brait as the initial investor. Subsequent to that, Brait decided to launch a multi-strat direct manager fund in-house, almost to compete with their own fund of hedge funds, because they saw it as a strategic threat that others might do such a thing. So in a way, cannibalizing their own business. And that, in essence, was the seeds of us coming together in what is today Matrix Fund Managers.
Bruce, please give us a bit of history on Matrix, how the firm was established, and a bit of detail on the funds that you represent.
Matrix, the business as it stands today, started as an operating division of Brait. The launch of the multi-strategy fund was the inception of this business, and we ran as a division of Brait for some years. So that was in 2006. We remained as an operating division of Brait for some time until Brait themselves changed their business model and moved towards an investment holding company type structure. And at that point, we were corporatized into a standalone business. For that entire duration, we were a boutique focused on basically hedge strategies only. And that was consistent with Brait's own defined competence as being an alternatives asset manager. So they ran private equity and hedge funds, and we were the hedge fund arm, in essence, of that business. Subsequent to us being separately corporatized, and Brait then subsequently exited, and the business is now controlled by management and external shareholders, we have diversified somewhat away from hedge. So we still have our core hedge fund business, which runs, as I mentioned, the Matrix Multi-Strategy Fund, as well as fixed income and equity funds. But then in 2014, we moved into more traditional long-only asset classes as well, and today run equity, fixed income, as well as balanced mandates in the traditional space. The business remains what would be called a boutique fund manager, in that we aren't enormous in terms of numbers of people. We've got about 20 heads, but I think, having been a part of a listed company, Brait, we've got a fairly robust operational infrastructure that was set up 10 years ago and continues, I think, to be a differentiating point for the business.
Bruce, please share with us how exactly your fund is different from other alternative investments and other mainstream products that are out there.
Okay, so the Matrix Multi-Strategy Fund is a multi-strategy hedge fund. One unique characteristic is the length of its track record. So as I mentioned earlier, it was launched in 2006. We were almost a month away from an 11-year track record. What makes the fund a little bit different is the specific unique strategies that sit inside the fund. So largely fixed income and equity strategies, but very non-traditional in that sense. So the fixed income strategy is mainly an interest rate derivative strategy, trading the front end of the yield curve. And the equity strategy is a long-short equity strategy, but with very contained net exposure limits. The fund is definitely an alpha-orientated product that doesn't have a lot of embedded market exposure, which makes it very different to traditional investment funds, which would typically be very correlated to some or other asset class, like an equity fund, which the primary determinant of whether it goes up or down would be the equity market. This fund is uncorrelated to asset classes. And having multiple strategies within a single fund also gives us an element of diversification in the sense of non-correlation between the different strategies, because in our case, both of these strategies have shown to perform at different times, and therefore you get really good risk offset between the different strategies for investors. And finally, I would say that having multiple strategies in a hedge context within a single fund also allows very efficient capital allocation. So we don't have a static allocation to the different strategies. We have an investment committee that can tweak capital allocation between the different strategies as opportunities rise and move around within the market. So I think the fund has shown over time to show very low correlation, as I say, to asset classes, but probably also to other investment funds. It's given very good risk-adjusted returns in its own right, but in a portfolio context, for investors to have exposure to this alongside other investment funds will certainly assist in them achieving risk-adjusted returns through the cycle.
Bruce, thank you very much for your time and sharing the detail on your background and the fund that you represent. And thank you for tuning into Black Onyx and learning more about the alternatives that we represent.